afternoon. Is it on? Yeah. And welcome to our concert. So nice to see so many of you here. And it's going to be a wonderful concert, I know. Number one thing I want to say is that I'm so happy that we have so many of the Dammers family here. So welcome to all of you. And Walter Dammers, Frank Dammers, some of the most important individuals in the New York music scene at about 1910 or so. Walter Dammers was the president of this club at one point, 1910-11, and he was only about 24 years old when he conducted at the Metropolitan Opera. So it's almost mind-boggling to me, a young person coming up from Germany and getting into the action so quickly. Frank and both Damrosius, their father, came over with them, and he lived here for a while as well. So this concert, Dear Composer, we call it, and this is the 6th concert that we have done with that title, and I'd like to tell you how that came about, this Dear Composer. One day I get a phone call from a composer called Douglas Townsend, and he said, well, I wrote the concerto for trombone and chamber orchestra. He said, will you record it for me? So I looked at the music, I said, yeah, you have to record it. And so I met Douglas, a person with a lot of good humor, and I also then met his wife, Jean. Jean Townsend is the one who's curating these concerts, and we are then happy to have Douglas's music performed, in addition to other composers who are actually known, but whose music is not really played as much that it should. So here on the stage, you see a quartet or a quintet of very young players from the Bloomingdale School. And I'm very, very happy to see you here. Why they are so young, why they are here, is because Douglas wrote the piece for this age group. And you will see the humor in Douglas's music in this piece, as you do in most of the pieces that he wrote. The coach for this group is Judith Olsen. And Judith and I go back a very, very long time. When I came to this country, a couple of years after I came, started playing recitals, and Judith was my accompanist. So when I had my debut recital in Carnegie Recital Hall in 1968, Judith was my accompanist. I think, Judith, are you here? I think you're here. If you are, you must stand up. Thanks a million. Thanks a million, Judith. And I missed you all these 50 years. Okay, so now Jean is going to run this program, and he has set up the whole program. I work with her a little bit, but she does the work, and she is fantastic at what she does. And I think you will appreciate the composers that we chose to be on this program. So give a hearty welcome to Jean Townsend. Jean?
Thank you very much. And you know, Per is my co-chair. We've been together on this since 2019. And from the beginning, 6 years, this is the 6th one, so we've had a lot of fun doing this. So happy Thanksgiving week, everyone. Thank you. Have you been thinking about what you were thankful for this year? thinking about the blessings that have been showering down upon us this year. The thing I'm most grateful for is that we're doing this concert, this Dear Composers concert, for the 6th time. And it's a very interesting program today, with the unique feature of 5 youth musicians from Manhattan's Bloomingdale School of Music. Now, this school has been in place since 1964. And I was a junior in college then. And it's located on West 108th Street, off Broadway. And it's always been there, in that location. And when my cousin Douglas was 70 years old, back in 1990, he was commissioned by this school to write a composition for the students there to perform, and he entitled it Concertino for Piano and 4 Diverse Instruments. And a concertino, you probably know, that is a little concerto. So, you know, you can have a piano concerto, a violin concerto. So this is like a little piano concerto. And we have a 13-year-old playing the piano. Her name is Angela Lau. And she's been taking piano from the beginning of time for her. And Judith Olson has been her teacher since she was like 4 or something.
How old are you?
5. She was 5. And she's been with Judith ever since. And Judith, coached Angela, but she also coached the whole ensemble. Another lady coached the string players, but she's not here today. Her name is Margot Cantor. So this piece was actually premiered by students with a wind quartet and a piano. And that was back in 1991. And so today we're going to hear these students play it with a string quartet. I've never heard it that way. Douglas did it with a string orchestra down in Princeton. They had a big youth orchestra down there at one time. Now these students are very special at Bloomingdale School. They're in a very special intensive program which aims to get them into selective universities, college, and music schools. And they are seated on stage, so let's meet them. I introduced already Angela Lau, the young pianist. And next we have, in the string quartet, Hyman Hahn. She's seated second, I guess. And she's violinist. Christopher Harach, he's also the violinist. Anna Soto. And Sophia Sanchez Martinez is a cello. We have quite a few parents here, and brothers and sisters, and grandparents even, to see some of these students. So it's a wonderful thing. Let's see. I just want to say one thing about this. If you listen, this is a typical neoclassical kind of piece that Douglas wrote. And it's, fast, slow, fast. It has 3 movements. But the second movement is the one you should really listen to. It's the one is always the one that Townsend, where he expresses his deepest feelings. And it's always the one that delivers the emotional punch. And it's the one that takes you to the territory beyond words. And in this piece, it's called Andante Romanza, the second movement. So now let's hear these talented young musicians perform Douglas Townsend's Concertino for Piano and 4 Diverse Instruments. so well trained. Douglas would love that if he were here. I want to just tell you a couple things about Douglas before we move on that relate to children. And he wrote quite a number of compositions for youth of various ages and various proficiencies. And he really enjoyed doing that. He loved children. And many of these youth compositions were printed and are still in print. And some of the best public middle schools and public high schools in the country perform his compositions for youth still. One of the last compositions he wrote, he looked to be 90, so he wrote this when he was 89. It was a suite with 5 movements, especially for 7th graders at an excellent public middle school in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And he and I drove down along the Atlantic coast to the school, and we delivered the score and parts to the students who fell in love with 89-year-old Douglas. He was like their grandfather, and we stayed there for 3 days, playing YouTube pieces with them and showing them what score paper looks like, you know, the old when you write it out like that. And they were so happy. And they spent the whole year learning to play this 10-minute piece that Douglas wrote for them. String piece, suite, 5 movements. And then they had a 7th grade concert and they played it, so it was a 10-minute thing they played. Now we couldn't go back down there, Douglas's health was not good. And so we listened to it via the forerunner of Zoom, I forget what it was called. And it was wonderful. It was thrilling, really. And they then devoted 2 full pages of their yearbook to their time with Douglas. Okay. And their work, learning to play his suite. They took whole pages of their yearbook and did this. And because they were so grateful and they were so happy that somebody paid attention to them. And, you know, so these children really, if you spend time with them they will love classical music. This was strictly classical music. So anyway, that was a little story about Douglas and how he went out of his way sometimes when he felt like it. So now we leave the Douglas Townsend segment and we turn to American composer David Del Tredici. I only met him once, a few years ago at an outdoor reception at the American Academy of Arts and Letters, which is located in Washington Heights in Manhattan. And he was of advanced age. And he was seated in the middle of the outdoor plaza, attended by an acquaintance of mine, Lisa Kirshner, who's the daughter of composer Leon Kirshner. And Lisa introduced me to him. And he lamented the fact that most of his friends and acquaintances has died, and he was quite lonely. He lived to be 86, and he passed away just 2 years ago. 2 years and 5 days ago on November 18th, 2023. Now, the executor of his estate, as well as his longtime friend and colleague, pianist Mark Pelican, is going to speak about Del Tredici. Plus, we are extremely lucky to have Mark performing Del Tredici's piano solo called Virtuoso Alice, think Alice in Wonderland. And Mark has performed this piece in many venues, and he has also recorded it and all the other Del Tredici piano pieces. Mark is a longtime standing member of the Bloomingdale School of Music, of the piano faculty, and he is the curator of the school's faculty concerts. And I urge you to read his very interesting musician's bio in the attachment to the program which we handed out. He has a very interesting career. So here he is to speak and play the solo piano, Mark Pelican.
Jean Townsend and the Musicians Club of New York for inviting me to share some of David's legacy and this beautiful piano piece that he wrote. I knew and worked with David for for 2 decades. And I'll give you a brief summary of his compositional life. But when I came into the picture, I was fortunate because his piano music, he returned to writing for the piano. But I'll get to that. He always called himself a late prodigy or an old prodigy. He grew up as a virtuoso pianist, and in his late teens was playing with orchestra, some of the big standard romantic Saint-Saëns, Liszt, and others, and including one concert with the legendary Arthur Fiedler. And there's a fun picture that we have of the two of them with Fiedler kind of in rehearsal, sort of pushing him down. And I think he behaved, except in performance. He did not want to play down. Music was to be projected. In his college years, he went to Aspen Music Festival to study. And he had a piano teacher there named Leonard Shore, who was a great pianist and teacher, mostly in Boston, but was here as well. And David couldn't stand him. He was a very meticulous kind of musician, and he thought he was mean. So he had to survive that summer. So he had the option of also pursuing composition or singing, which I assume was probably being in the chorus. He chose composition. Wrote what became his Opus 1, his first piece, the soliloquy for piano. Someone saw it and said you should take it into Darius Leo to his composition class, and he did. Leo declared him a composer. So his life changed after that. He then went on to write some great works, particularly chamber works in the style of Schoenberg and Bartók, music that he found fresh and alive, including pieces like Syzygy, Night Controverse. The next period was his Alice in Wonderland fascination / obsession. Many of you probably know some of these works. It was with these Alice pieces that he became very famous. In 1980, he won the Pulitzer Prize for The Memory of a Summer Day. In that period, he told me and wrote and spoke about the fact that Alice was telling him to write more tonally, that to tell the story of Alice and all of the Wonderland fantasies and all these things that were sparking his imagination, he needed his music to become more tonal. It wasn't like an agenda he had to become unique. And he thought to himself, I'll probably sink my career doing this. But he taught us a lesson that he spoke often about, to trust your instinct. And his instinct was to listen to Alice. And boy, was he right. So he wrote, there are several Alice works, and tonight, this afternoon we'll hear a piece that's in that, and I'll talk about it in a minute. From Alice, he eventually let go of Alice in Wonderland, and the period before I met him, there was a burst of big song cycles. There were other orchestral works, non-Alice works, and in this period he was exploring his gayness, himself as a gay man, as a gay musician, gay composer, and setting incredible gay poets. One work is titled Gay Life that he wrote for the San Francisco Symphony, that's also good for piano and voice, with texts of various wonderful poets talking about gay life, losing a lover to AIDS, looking at the personal ads to meet someone, to connect with someone. So that life that he led, he wanted to bring into classical music. And that's perhaps one of his biggest legacies. When I met him in 2003, he still had that in mind, but I would say the last 20 years of his life were committed to piano music, chamber music, so these intimate forms, and he was writing for friends and colleagues, sometimes without commission. He just had to write. He had to write. And if you look in his archive, there are hundreds and thousands of pages of music. little notebooks, working out contrapuntal ideas, orchestration, phone numbers, lots of phone numbers. The reason why I picked Virtuoso Alice for you, it kind of combines that early, what I was just talking about, that early virtuoso pianist and Alice in what is one of his most, it's virtuosic, but it's also very intimate. And you'll hear how he explores the piano. And I know in his program note, he said, well, he's influenced by Liszt and the operatic fantasies. It's true, but he has his own unique exploration of the piano that's truly David. Before I play the piece, I'd like to just read the acrostic song. That is the final part of Final Alice, perhaps his most famous Alice piece, in which the soprano sings what has become probably his signature song. So I'd like to play that, recite that before I play the piano piece. A boat beneath a sunny sky, lingering onward dreamily in an evening of July. Children three that nestle there, eager eye and willing ear, here, please the simple tale to hear. Long has paled that sunny sky, echoes fade and memories die, autumn frosts have slain July. Still she haunts me phantom-wise, Alice moving under skies, never seen by waking eyes. Children yet the tale to hear, eager eye and willing ear, lovingly shall nestle near. In a wonderland they lie, dreaming as the days go by, dreaming as the summers lie, ever drifting down the stream, lingering in the golden gleam. Life, what is it but a dream?
right, so next up on the program is, well, it's the remarkable German-American composer Leopold Damrosch. How many of you have been to Damrosch Park in the Lincoln Center complex? Everybody. Everybody's in it. And there is a dedicatory plaque there. I don't know if you've seen that. And it is to Leopold and some of his children and grandchildren and in-laws. And this plaque is there. I took a picture of it, and it reads, Damrosch Park, in tribute to the 3 generations of one family who shared the gift of music with the people of New York. And then it lists the names of people that they feel, deserve this tribute. Leopold Damrosch, who's the patriarch, his son, Frank Damrosch, his other son, Walter Damrosch, his daughter, Clara Damrosch Mannes, the Mannes School of Music. David Mannes was her husband. She and he together did started the Mannes School of Music. And then their son, Leopold Damrosch Mannes. Those are the names on the plaque. But there are many more Damrosches. But those are the ones involved in music that were so significant at the end of the 19th century. And what is most fortuitous for those of us here today is that we have in our midst the next 3 generations of Damrosches. And they are direct descendants of the patriarch, Leopold Damrosch. And I hope you like genealogy. I do, I find it fascinating. The generations just march along. We have among us 2 great-grandsons of Leopold. One is named David Damrosch. He's in the audience. I don't know. Could you stand up? No.
Great.
Excuse me. Great. Oh, you're great. Oh, sorry. Okay, and then we have a great-grandson, Thomas Reed. He in the audience here. He is a secretary in our club, the Musicians Club of New York. And he's waiting in the wings to speak to us about Walter. And Walter was in this club too. Walter Damrosch was in this club. This is a very old club, and he was also the president of this club. And then we have Tom Reed. See, Tom Reed is not called Damrosch, he's called Reed because he came down through a woman instead of a man. But it's all the same, the DNA is just so all equal is DNA, right? So he's got a daughter named Danielle, and then she's got a daughter named Julie. So they reside, all 3 of these generations reside here in Manhattan, and as did the first 3 generations. We have 6 generations of these people. And then Danielle and her daughter Julie are both amateur musicians, very good amateur musicians. So they maintain this tradition. And Danielle plays the violin and Julie plays the oboe. And Julie is the young one. She actually just received a Bachelor of Music from the Jean School of Music at Indiana University. It's a very good music school. Now, these 2 descendants that represent the 5th and 6th generation will speak about Leopold Damrosch, and they will speak about his music and his remarkable career in Prussia and in New York City after he immigrated here with his family in 1871. That is only 6 years after our Civil War was over. See the time frame we're talking about. So please welcome to the stage Danielle Reed. She's a Damrosch, but she's a Reed. 5th generation Damrosch and a native New Yorker. Okay, Danielle.
Okay, so Leopold Damrosch, my great-grandfather, was great. Thank you. Great. We're going to get this. was born in Posen in Prussia in October of 1832. And in a partial autobiography that my dad found when he was rummaging through the family papers, Dan explained that in his earliest days were marked by a kind of tragedy. His mother died basically when he was born or very shortly afterwards. So he was raised by his father and then his mother's sister, who became his stepmother. That was also fairly common in those days. And he remembers that he was first taught singing in school when he was 5, and he just loved it. He says that singing became the foundation of his lifelong passion for music. And he was also especially doted on by his maternal grandmother, who, you know, in some ways that makes sense. He was all that was left of the daughter they had lost when he was born. So his maternal grandmother gave him violin lessons when he was about 8 and a half. So he started and he progressed very quickly. He was something of a prodigy. And he pursued music with a pretty singular passion from then on. Until he was about 15, that was fine. But then at about age 15, when his schoolwork started to get a little bit more difficult, he had his first big blow up with his dad over this. His father really wanted him to, you know, have a real job. I don't know if this sounds familiar to anybody, but he really wanted him to go to university and have some kind of profession, you know, hopefully one that rhymed with doctor or lawyer, right? That was his father's thinking. So, you know, anybody who has ever known a teenager or been a teenager or had a teenager knows that the absolute best way to get them to do something is, especially if it's something they already kind of want to do, is to forbid it. So you can guess where this, well, you kind of know the end of this story, right? But, you know, there was some back and forth. He practiced his violin at friends' houses to avoid conflict. Eventually, he did wrestle with his filial piety, his devotion, his obligation to his parents. And he did agree to go to medical school. And he graduated from medical school. And then he decided, you know, all the while he was taking violin lessons and so on, he decided to become a professional musician, and he never looked back. That was that. So he became a well-known solo violinist pretty quickly. He went to Weimar, and in Weimar he was introduced to Franz Liszt, who gave him promptly a position as solo violinist in the what was called the ducal orchestra, the court orchestra, and Franz Liszt was music director there. So he was doing that, and then he started conducting, and sometime in the mid-1860s, he was conducting his own orchestra in Breslau. He was music director, and he was conductor for this orchestra in Breslau, which is in Prussia, which is where he was from. And he invited Liszt to come and conduct some concerts, and he invited a man called Richard Wagner, who also became a friend of his, to come and conduct some of his own music. So he was doing pretty well, right? He already started composing music by then as well. So, I mean, he had it all, right? He was a successful solo violinist, he was a conductor, a music director, and a composer. So this brings up a question, which is, why did he come to New York? Because as we are living through, he did come to New York. Why did he come to New York? Why not stay in Breslau? And the short version of my answer to this is, Breslau wasn't big enough for his dreams. He had, dreams on a grand scale. He really wanted to conduct a first-class orchestra and a first-class choral society and give the kind of concert season and the kind of concerts you expect in Berlin, right? But, he wanted more concerts, he wanted bigger concerts, but Breslau was just not Berlin. And he couldn't get the patrons, artists back then needed patrons too, he couldn't get them to support his vision. So he was a little bit frustrated. And I have to say the political atmosphere at this time did not help. At this time, 1860s, Prussia was being run by a man you may have heard of named Bismarck, who was busy creating out of a confederation of German states a single nation. And to do this, it required apparently a lot of invading their neighbors, Denmark, Austria, France. So if you wanted to get ahead in 1860s Prussia, the thing to be was an officer in the military, not a musician, right? So when a German choral society in New York called the Aryan Society, well, they didn't give him a call, but they got in touch with him. And they said they were looking for a music director, and he thought about it for a few minutes and then said yes, he was going to up and move his family and come to New York and be director of the Aryan Society. So he was nothing if not bold, this guy. So that's what he did. His family by this time in his life included his wife, Paulina von Heimburg, who was a soprano, a very well-known soprano, and also her sister Marie, and the Damrosch's then 4 children. So Franz Jr., Franz, I should say, who was named after Franz Liszt, and he was also called Frank. And then another son, Walter, you've heard a little bit about already, you'll hear more about Walter. A daughter, Marie, another daughter, Clara, and my great-grandmother, my great-grandmother, I'm going to get this right, his 5th and his youngest child, Elizabeth, was actually born here in New York City. So from his post at the Aryan Society, he soon went on to found his own choral society, the Oratorio Society, which still exists. And he also founded and conducted the New York Symphony in 1878. That later merged with the Philharmonic to become what we now know as the New York Philharmonic. And in 1884, he became chief conductor and music director of the Metropolitan Opera Company, which was by then, which was at that time pretty new. I don't know if anybody's seen the Gilded Age, so you know the drama around that. But I think it was in his 2nd season when he was invited to conduct and be music director. And he used this as a platform to introduce New York and America to German opera. And he had to do a number of Wagner operas, his friend Wagner, including Tannhäuser, Lohengrin, and Die Walküre. And he also that season conducted Beethoven's Fidelio. Now, all of this repertoire sounds very familiar, almost standard to us now, but you have to imagine back then, it was completely new. It was revolutionary for American audiences that he was doing this. So I like to think that if Leopold Damrosch's own life had had a Wagnerian leitmotif, it would have probably been something like a rapid ascending arpeggio on a French horn. I'm thinking, you know, the sword motif in the ring cycle, but double time, something like that. You know, something unstoppable, triumphant, and maybe, yet also with a sensitive timbre. Leopold Damrosch fought for his music his entire life and his right to inhabit it, and he was just determined to share that passion with others. Now, at this point, he was conducting a whole lot, every concert himself, for the New York Symphony, for the Oratorio Society, and the opera, and it was kind of exhausting. He caught a severe upper respiratory virus of some kind, and he died aged 52 in February 1885. Before the end of the season of German opera that he started at the Metropolitan, and he left his son Walter, who was then 23, like my daughter, to take his place at the podium. So you're going to hear more about that from my dad in a few minutes, but first my daughter Julie, who is herself a musician, and she's, by the way, a professional, unlike me. She does play professionally. She has her degree from Indiana. She's an oboist and also a violinist, and she's going to talk about Leopold Damrosch's music that you're going to hear today.
Hi everyone, it's so great to be here today to honor the music of some lesser known yet very talented composers, including some works by my great-great-great-grandfather, Leopold Damrosch. Great-great. You just heard a bit of background information about Leopold's life and career from my mom. Prior to this concert, I admittedly didn't know all these details about his life, and I found it especially interesting that Leopold took such a keen interest in vocal music from such a young age. Any instrumentalist will tell you that their voice is the first instrument they learn to use, even if they don't end up becoming a professional singer. In other words, we use our instruments as vessels to transmit our voices. Although Leopold concentrated on the violin and later became a conductor, his singing never ceased. and we will hear this in the next selections of his pieces that will be played shortly. Though these pieces were specifically written for violin and piano, I can't help but think of them as art songs, a genre that is usually associated with vocal music and piano accompaniment. The art song genre originated in the 18th century as a Western compositional style, but really began to flourish in the 19th century after the development of the modern-day piano with its warm timbre and brilliant acoustic. Art songs were originally meant to be performed privately in people's homes, where singers and pianists would interpret poetry set to music. While Leopold's 3 pieces on today's program are not written for vocalists and are not set to poetry, they do follow the traditional format of the art song, which we call ABA form. This means that we are presented with an initial theme and are taken on a journey around the world with this theme and eventually end up back home with a very similar theme as the original one, though it's slightly more complex and reflective. The first piece we'll hear, Romanza, or Romance, is very lyrical and melodic. The piano helps move the violin's melody along, while the violin resists and tries to bask in its own lush, romantic melody. Eventually, the 2 parts come to a compromise when the original melody, the A theme, returns. Both parts have become quieter and more introverted, and the piece comes to a peaceful end on a beautiful A major chord, often thought of as the happy chord. The next piece we'll hear, Idola, which means the portrayal of a happy scene, conveys just that. At the beginning of the piece, Leopold writes this, for instance, instructions for the musicians interpreting his score. Gentle and always with a flute-like character to your tone. Thus, I think it's fair to say he'd like the musicians to play with a light and airy quality vastly different from his passionate romanza. The violin cadenza after the first few bars introduces this light quality, later followed by a constant playfulness over the piano's dotted rhythms that seem to evoke a carefree quality to the music, like a child skipping in a meadow. The final selection of Leopold's works we'll hear today, Capricetto, which is Italian for a little capricious dance, is also quite upbeat and playful. The tempo is faster than those of Leopold's 2 preceding works, and is quite technically demanding on performers, requiring lots of virtuosity and agility. The piece has a rather mischievous quality to it that reminds me of my cat, Coco, who is quite the troublemaker and is also incredibly agile and innocent. When the A theme returns, after a pretty short middle section, the piano's line becomes much shorter in terms of articulation and has many more moving notes than before. This drives energy all the way to the end of the piece and leads to a triumphant ending. Thank you so much for listening to both of our speeches, and we now love to welcome violinist Carlos Rafael Martinez Arguello and pianist Saúl Ramos. They are both very talented and accomplished musicians, and our family is very grateful to have them join us today. Please welcome Carlos and Saúl to the stage.
Oh, so beautiful. So refined. Oh my goodness. Romantic, 19th century music. Really beautiful. So now we turn our attention to Leopold's son, Walter. And this is likely the Damrosch you've all heard about in connection with the New York City music world. And I will let Tom Reed come up and tell you about him because Tom Reed is the great-grandson of Leopold, but Walter is Leopold's son. So Tom is going to tell you all about Walter. Walter was the president of this club from 1913 to 1917, which is basically World War I. And Tom is the secretary of this club. So now we're going to hear from Tom, learn about Walter.
Thank you, Jean, and thank all of you for coming today. I was feeling some tears in my eyes as I heard these wonderful musicians, Carlos and Saul, perform pieces which I had never heard before. I don't think anyone in my family has heard before, and I'm fairly sure no one in the audience has heard before, with such great tenderness, passion, and skill. So I'm really grateful to them for bringing these pieces to life. I'm only sorry that they're not part of the standard repertoire. Maybe somehow they will become more frequently performed. I think they deserve to be heard by more audiences. So I hope that happens. So as Danielle has mentioned, Leopold Damrosch, his second son Walter, was born in Breslau, Prussia in 1862. He arrived in New York with the rest of his family at age 9 in 1871. And as I think Danielle also mentioned, or Jean, Walter's younger sister, my grandmother Elizabeth Damrosch, was born in New York the next year, 1872. Danielle has mentioned Walter's elder brother Frank, who founded the Institute of Musical Art that later merged with Juilliard and continues today as Juilliard, and their sister Clara, who married David Mannes, and together founded the Mannes School, which is now Mannes College of Music, part of the new school university. But in these brief remarks, I'm just focusing on Walter, whose song Danny Deever you will be hearing shortly. Walter studied music and conducting under the guidance of his father, but his career got its first big boost when in the winter of 1885, Leopold died suddenly. And at age 23, Walter took over from him as musical director of the Met Opera to finish its second season, comprised of mostly German opera. First, a few remaining performances in New York, and then took the opera on tour. He also assumed the direction of the New York Symphony Society and the Oratorio Society. One of the singers in the Oratorio Society was Louise Whitfield, then the fiancée of Andrew Carnegie, one of the Society's directors. Walter recognized that he badly needed more conducting knowledge and experience. So in early 1887, he wrote to his father's old friend, the famous German pianist and conductor Hans von Bülow, and arranged to spend time with him that spring and summer in order to fill the gaps in his musical education. When Walter sailed for Europe in the spring of 1887, by coincidence, Mr. Carnegie and his brand new bride, Louise Whitfield, who they were married just an hour before the ship sailed, were passengers on the same ship to take their honeymoon in the Carnegie ancestral home in Scotland. The Carnegies invited Walter to dine with them every evening on board the ship. And by the end of the voyage, it had gotten along so well that the Carnegies invited Walter to stay with them in Scotland after he finished his studies with von Bülow. He did so, and over that summer and the following summer in 1888, Walter persuaded Mr. Carnegie to fund the building of a new music hall to provide a more suitable performance space for the Symphony Society and the Oratorio Society. So that is the origin story of Carnegie Hall, which opened to great fanfare in May of 1891, with Peter Tchaikovsky and Walter sharing the conducting honors for the entire opening week. Walter continued to conduct the Symphony Society Orchestra until it merged with the Philharmonic in 1928, as well as directing the Oratorio Society and making regular guest conducting appearances at the Met Opera. He composed several operas himself and established his own Damrosch Opera Company, although none of these works remain in today's repertory. He also composed other musical works, one of them being the Danny Deever song you were about to hear. Walter was eager to embrace the new media of his time, which in the 1920s and 1930s meant radio. Beginning in 1923, he broadcast lecture recitals and concerts from Carnegie Hall. Starting in the late 1920s, he broadcast countrywide over the then new radio networks. He had an enormous radio audience, and 30,000 people wrote letters to him to express their appreciation. That's a lot of letters. Walter believed in encouraging young composers and was greatly impressed by George Gershwin. He commissioned Gershwin's Concerto in F and premiered this work in 1925 with the Symphony Society Orchestra, the composer at the piano. He also premiered Gershwin's An American in Paris with the combined orchestras in 1928. Walter regularly gave children's and young people's concerts with his orchestra to introduce children and teenagers to classical music, an idea that was taken up again many years later by Leonard Bernstein, among others. Even more significant is that all during the 1930s, he collaborated with his friend David Sarnoff, who was then the head of the National Broadcasting Company, to use that radio network to broadcast a weekly music appreciation hour to public schools all across the U.S. as part of the students' required curriculum. This lasted until 1942, when Walter was 80. The broadcasts were accompanied by teaching materials and workbooks furnished to the students. Of course, this didn't land equally for all of the captive student listeners, but I have little doubt that this early exposure to classical music disposed many of these students to attend concerts or otherwise get involved in music as they got older, and to pass their appreciation on to their own children. Fortunately for us lovers of the great classical music canon, as well as of the wonderfully creative musical works of the present day and the more recent past, some of which you have heard today, the music schools and conservatories like the Bloomingdale School, whose students you heard perform at the outset of our program today, continue to attract talented young performers and encourage them to develop careers as composers and performing musicians. I will now introduce Walter Damrosch's song, Danny Deever. It incorporates a poem of the same name by Rudyard Kipling. The words tell the story of the hanging of a soldier who had shot and killed his bunkmate. It's in a call and response format, a dialogue between files on parade, meaning the ordinary soldier or perhaps group of soldiers, and the color sergeant, the regiment's highest non-commissioned officer. It's more than a bit grim, but also stirring, and a tale designed to impress on young, new recruits the need for strict military discipline. It was one of the most popular songs in America at the end of the 19th century, during the high Victorian era, and is said to have been one of Teddy Roosevelt's favorite songs. We are very fortunate indeed to have as our singer a baritone whose career is exploding all over America, Miguel Vasquez, and his accompanist, whom you just heard, the very accomplished and polished pianist with a DMA from Juilliard, Saul Ibarra Ramos. So welcome, Miguel and Saul.
Hanging Danny Deever in the morning. which is hard to do, but I just finished doing William Grant's Still, Bayou Legend, and at the end of the opera, Leon sings A Miracle is the name of the aria, which is something that happens after hanging, and I was like, well, let's give a little bit of light to a hanging moment. So this is A Miracle.
Run the quiet, hanging body, emerged on my last Basile, radiant with happiness, filled with a newfound life. And as we watched, there came to join him another shining being. A woman whose radiance merged with his, as both were always thus together ascended, gently came their forms till they were lost in the heavenly mist surrounding them. A miracle, we have seen a miracle.
So now we're going to Ned Rorem, and I'm not going to say much about him except that Douglas knew him. They were both together at Tanglewood in 1947, and they were both studying with Aaron Copland, orchestration. And Aaron used to select 6 or 7 students every summer, and stay there the whole summer. And he selected Ned and Douglas in the same group. And there's a picture of them in the Library of Congress together with Aaron Copland and all the other few. They were all men, young men in their 20s. And Aaron Copland's playing the piano and all these young composers just surrounding him, so it's a lovely portrait there. Okay, so now we're going to welcome to the stage 2 colleagues of Ned Rorem to speak about him. They've been waiting now a long time. Trudy Chan and Frank O'Terry. Did I pronounce that right? Frank O'Terry. Frank O'Terry.
So, it's fitting to end. We finally are hearing some vocal music. We heard some songs, and now we'll hear 4 songs by Ned Rorem, who is perhaps the most prolific composer of American art songs. We heard a wonderful description of the birth of the art song and how it came about. Ned composed over 500 art songs.
That's a lot.
And I should say just a word about how we're both connected to Ned in very different ways. I'm a composer and a writer about music. My 2 passions in the world are music and language, and those were Ned's 2 passions. And Ned was long a hero of mine, and I had the opportunity to do numerous talks with him, pre-concert talks, talks for the ASCAP Foundation, for a new music box, a web magazine I founded and edited for a quarter of a century. And Ned has been a constant source of inspiration. I've done many annotations of discs of his music as well. I also want to point out that the 500 songs of Ned Rorem, there still has yet to be a complete recording of him. So talk about justices that need to be made right. And Gertie used to have a role trying to make that right. I'll let her speak about that.
Yes, so I used to work at Ned's publisher, Brevig Hall, on the promotion team, and I was assigned to be the publishing representative, aka manager, of Ned Rorem, and actually also did a trilogy. And that's how we both met Mark Cohen, actually. So all the circles come together. So during the time I was working at Boozy, I, of course, need to study Ned's music in order to do justice in promoting his music. But besides studying his music and talking to performing organizations and presenters about Ned's music, I took promotion to heart. I actually played a lot of his songs. And I'm a collaborative pianist, and for a while I have a vocal piano duo working with the vocalist Phil Chia, and we presented many concerts of curated art songs. And every time when we're talking about, okay, what we're going to do for this next concert? How about Ned? What are we going to do for that other concert? How about Ned? So we sang a lot of Ned's songs, including a full concert celebrating Ned's 90th birthday, which he came to our concert, great honor, and actually David Atrachi was there too. So both names that we've been hearing a lot tonight. And what do you think about the songs?
Yeah, before we talk more about the songs, in the opportunity to speak with Ned a number of times, he said a number of things that were extremely memorable and quotable. And there's one that has never left me, and it gets quoted in other places all the time. He described himself as being 5 things: a pacifist, an alcoholic, an atheist, a homosexual, and a composer. And he said the only one that people don't understand is composer. But I find it very interesting because for me, Ned is at least 6 things. He's also an extraordinary writer. But it's interesting that he didn't mention that as one of the 5. And I think the reason that is because he became a writer largely because of his frustration that music was so difficult to understand. And he wanted to be understood. And he famously never really wanted to talk about his own music. He said music doesn't really mean anything. You can't have a note C sharp and say that means table. It doesn't. And so for him, the words were a way into the music. And even though he wrote way more than 500 art songs, he wrote concertos, he wrote operas, he wrote 3 symphonies. He wrote an orchestral piece. He won the Pulitzer Prize in Music for one of his orchestral pieces. But all of these pieces of music stem from his interest in words and in literature. And if you look at a lot of his pieces, many of them are in multiple short movements rather than the standard fast, slow, fast, and have titles inspired by literature. And he was very humble in a way, even though a lot of people say, oh, he was very much an egomaniac. And if you see pictures of his apartment, he had portraits of himself hanging everywhere. But he was very humble. He said, well, you know, people like my music because I said good words. I have good choice in literature. And we should talk a little bit about these 4 Tennyson songs. Tennyson was one of the many, many great poets he set. He set a lot of Walt Whitman. He set tons and tons of poets, Gertrude Stein. And these 4 Tennyson songs, interestingly, composed a year before I was born. So when he was 40, a very long time ago, he lived to be 99 years old. And these are rarely done as a complete set. People take 1 song or 2 and do them on a program. So it's a real treat to get them to hear them all together as he originally conceived them.
Yeah, I would also add that myself has performed songs number 2, 3, and 4, never the first one, and never as a set. So just to corroborate what Frank is saying. And I would also want to add that the second thing about Ned is he's a fantastic pianist. And he also recorded a lot of, he has a lot of recordings with himself on the piano, playing with many different vocalists. So, quite a person.
Yeah, and I have to say, you know, we got here kind of early, so we got to hear people doing sound check and rehearsing a little bit, and to hear Elizabeth Pope singing and Saul Ibarra Ramos on piano, which you're about to hear, it's a shame that Ned isn't here to hear them, because they really, really deliver his music and his words. And for him, hearing the words was so important, the primacy of language and being able to communicate through the music. So we should let them come on stage and communicate his music with you. And thank you so much for being here and for sharing this afternoon with us.
As we
Now lies the
have a joyful Thanksgiving weekend.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have just had one of the most exciting mornings of my life. I've just spent half an hour in the general laboratories of the General Electric Company, and they gave me a complete reproduction of a concert which I conducted in New York last Saturday evening at the broadcasting rooms of the National Broadcasting Company, together with all my explanatory comments on the music. And for the first time in my life, I have heard my orchestra playing first an overture of Don Giovanni by Mozart, then the Redemption by César Franck, and ending with the second Rhapsody of Liszt. And all I can tell you is that I was delighted with the playing of my orchestra. I will say nothing about the excellence of the conductor. One hears all kinds of marvels now about the interchange of sound and light, that they are the same thing, they are but variations which are vibrations which express themselves in different fashions, and I would myself like to take advantage of this opportunity and also for the first time in my life see sound. So I would like to play the chord of C on the piano and then see it photographed on the film. Well, that was the Do. Now let us take the chord of Re. Mi. Ah. And we end with the dominant.